and welcome to Pricing College with your hosts Aidan Campbell.
And Joanna Wells.
This episode is about recorded music and the business and pricing model in the recorded music industry. Interestingly, we've actually had a lot of problems with our sound this morning, and so this is the second take at this episode, and we could do with a professional music recorder to help us.
Yes, look, I hope you can hear us now, okay? Anyway, the music industry. If you compare now to the 1970s, you'll find that sales in music across the board have dropped by almost 50%. The market size is contracting, and we're wondering, can we improve the business model, the pricing and revenue model in some way? What seems to be the problem here?
I think the first thing we'll look at now will be to kick off is how technology basically made the music industry and how it really has damaged it in recent years. Like many industries we've covered in the past, from blockbuster video to others, and even the Coca-Cola model with vending machines, recorded music was actually a quite recent invention, early 1900s, late 1890s, whereas before that it would have been live music, etc. With the gramophone and recording music on records, we could actually have recorded artists. And from the 1920s onwards, we had famous recording artists that fed into the talkie movies and all this sort of stuff. That probably peaked around the 60s and 70s. Think of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Motown, and all that, Elvis Presley. And then with the 1980s, we had video pretty much started to kill the radio star. We had MTV came on where pop bands recorded their videos. And then with digitalisation, really the back catalogs, all the money in the music industry became worthless or very diminished overnight, whereby people would you could share music for free. We saw the rise of Napster, Pirates Bay, and these sort of things. And then in recent years, we've seen, I suppose, the demonization of Spotify, whereby music can be consumed almost freely, any tune in the world in your headphones.
So, what is the true value in the music industry? Let's think about that. Okay, so is it in owning the music itself? I think there's a fair bit of value in that. Yes, you can sing a song, but it's the person that sings and owns the song, who's written the song, that gets the money, the royalties. So royalties is a good revenue stream. And then the second value driver is in the distribution of music. If you own distribution, you own like channels to market, you own supply, and you also can meet demand. So there's huge value in that. That's why record labels own distribution very carefully for a number of years, and why Spotify wanted to disrupt that very thing so we could freely distribute music without having to pay a huge markup for it. I think you can remember that, people were paying something like $40 for, a double CD. Not because it was potentially, well, depending on how much you wanted to listen to that music, worth it. It's just the music industry, the big labels really did own all rights, and could mark up on distribution costs and production costs. But anyway, that's a whole different area. I suppose Spotify came in and completely disrupted that old model. Some people say it was an outmoded model that was one-sided. I think so to some degree. But has Spotify really fixed the problem? Yes, it's fixed the distribution problem, but why are so many artists now complaining about it?
I think a lot of people look at Spotify and say, "Oh, we're only getting a couple of cents per song," or, the lion's share of the money collected from the subscriptions, etc. The vast majority of that money will go to, your top 10% of artists. And I suppose that's the way any industry always has been, whether it's sports, movies, entertainment. The big stars take the big money, but people compare. They almost compare the modern market with Spotify, whereby they're getting a few cents per listen to the old market back in the 80s, whereby people were buying the albums in the local record store. I think that's a false comparison. And I think the reason is because the 80s is an awful long time ago. We can't go from Spotify back to the 80s. We can't remove the digital revolution. I think we're either going to go from Spotify to again just a free for all sharing, file sharing on illegal downloads, where in that regard the music industry gets nothing. So I think the expectation that we can ever go back to the way it was, that's never going to happen now because just technology has changed, and we cannot uninvent the digital revolution. So I think the reality of it is in that recorded music sector, this distribution method is what we have at the moment. But I think other questions we want to ask is it the best distribution method that there is? And has the product that music actually sells, has that significantly changed?
I think, Spotify was set up on very idealistic principles of once music is freely distributed, people will listen to more and a greater variety of music through the platform. However, looking at the what people actually listen to, that's not the case at all. It's the 80 20% rule. Most people listen to the top five, top 50 artists, and that's it. And when you look at Spotify revenue model, basically all revenue from all artists go into a one central pot, and a percentage fee is given to the best selling songs. Now, the best selling songs go to that top 5% of artists who we all know, the Taylor Swifts of the world, whereas everybody else gets very little. In fact, they get paid much less than 1 cent every time their music is streamed. So, in effect, if we know that very few people are listening to most artists and they're only getting paid less than 1 cent, it would take them thousands of streaming listens to get something like $10 to $15. It really doesn't make much financial sense for most artists to go through their platform. And this is why there's been so much bad press about Spotify's model in the artist community, and also customers. People that listen to artists think this is unfair. I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity to revise the model because even when you look at the profitability of Spotify, it's still largely unprofitable. So it's not really working for them either.
I think with recorded music, we have to ask the question, what are people actually buying? In the old days, people would go into a record store. That was an experience. They enjoyed the day out. They'd go with their friends. They might get some advice from the person who owned the record store. They'd browse down the aisles. They'd be attracted by the cover art on the record, on the vinyl. People might even have conspiracy theories about some of the classic records, like some of the Beatles albums, where entire conspiracies grew up around what the symbolism meant on that album cover. Owning the product, bringing it home, it was like a piece of art. So you're buying the sounds, but you're also buying the paraphernalia that goes with it, the membership of a club. People apparently carried the Beatles records with them when they were first released in the '60s, and that really gave that sense of ownership, the solid feeling of the music. That has all been wiped away and really is gone with the digitalization. People would sit down with the vinyl, and albums were written to be listened to from start to end, like a work of art. Now with Spotify, that's not the system that I would say very, very few listeners really sit and listen through an entire album. They dip in and dip out and listen to it, in the car, walking. So the relationship with the music has very much changed. And are we buying a product? I don't think we are. We're not buying products anymore. We're not buying something that could go on your album or your shelf and that you could show your friends. Really, you're buying content. You're buying some format of content that could be consumed in a different way.
I suppose in the early 2000s, it was CD sales that peaked. Before that was cassettes. Vinyl sales pretty much have stayed constant over time. It just appears now that vinyl sales are peaking, but really in demand, but they're not really. It's still a very niche segment, bought by a few people who still do value music in the way Aidan was describing before, that music is art, and that a vinyl is more than just music. It's sort of a living memory of sorts, and it also is a status symbol for musicians who go, look, I have vinyl. I'm serious about music. Now, there's only a few people that really are willing to pay the full sort of $100 price tag for vinyl because they love music so much. However, it is a very profitable and a segment, and also sales are growing. But you know, what's the profile of a segment like that? It's probably something like a middle-aged sort of man and woman who like very niche music, and potentially, you know, there's not a mass market need for that type of, you know, vinyl sale, you know, anymore. People, young people, are quite happy and automatically go to Spotify to get their free dose of music, and they're pretty understanding. They'll just listen to, you know, the basic 10 songs at the time that they potentially hear off the radio.
I think we can look at it, a lot of the pricing concepts. We always talk in pricing that if something is for free, it would be consumed many times more than if it was charged at 1 cent. And people consume pop music or any type of music now through Spotify or YouTube or any other system, and they don't really care about it. It probably decreases the attention and the care because you're not upfront paying. My understanding is still with Spotify, for example, very few people actually subscribe. Still, the vast majority of people consume the free version with adverts. So I'd say that, and that relationship with the music, then perhaps it feeds back on itself. There's a negative feedback loop whereby the less it's valued, the less valuable it becomes, the less value people put into it. The other thing I'd say is until the COVID situation hit last year, you could almost argue that recorded music was a lost leader in many regards. It was being put out on the market really to advertise the concert experience, the large concerts, the tours that were probably bigger than ever for new artists such as Taylor Swift and some of the more established historical acts. People like, I don't know if calling them historical would make them happy, but people like Madonna, Rolling Stones, etc., whereby they were packing world stadiums, football stadiums worldwide. And that was really becoming the financial model behind the industry. Obviously, at the moment, we don't know when that's going to return. I'm quite confident it will be sooner rather than later. But with that gone, we're actually left without real revenue, raising abilities in the music industry, and then it brings the whole Spotify issue to a crisis. Can we go back to a scenario where, in some way, the bands, the writers, the music companies can add some additional value to the product that isn't just the sound?
I think it was because of COVID, I really started thinking about the impact of COVID on musicians and the industry. And I think one of the positive things to come out of COVID for musicians was that people actually found themselves becoming more willing to pay for the premium version of Spotify than they did even a year before. As Aidan was saying before, that most people, even young people, didn't even think twice about getting a premium paid for, plan. They would just go, yeah, that's fine. I'm quite willing to listen to the ads. However, when you're stuck in a confined space for weeks on end, what was found was that people were not willing to listen and would pay for not listening to adverts. So what we see now is an increase in people switching to premium plans since COVID because they become fussier. They want to just listen to music. The types of music they listen to, however, are the same. They just don't want to listen to the ads. I think potentially another area that musicians can think of, new artists, to get more revenue would be looking at something like, YouTube, because they pay much better rates than Spotify and music platforms. And a lot of artists are going there now. I think, influencers have really led the way there. How we've seen these success stories, rags to riches of social influencers getting rich quickly by showcasing their lives for us on YouTube. I think now the musicians will follow suit. Another revenue stream would also be, royalties off radio. But as a result of COVID, unfortunately, restaurants, cafes have closed and people are just not playing the music, so royalties have gone down. So now a lot of artists are going to crowdfunding platforms to to literally get finance, to help with marketing, to help with, just promotion in general. And some are even going back to old agency model to get promoted and sponsored for events. I think what's happening quite clearly is that the musicians and the music industry are diversifying. The money is now in different areas, and you've got to be much quicker and nimble to find it.
I think we can see a lot of overlap between what's happening in the music industry versus, the cinema and movie industry, whereby we've seen conglomeration through one portal, where the Spotify, Netflix, stuff like that. But I also think, and we argued this on our last podcast about movies, that studios will go direct. You'll just go direct to their company, and they will do it. And I think the music industry is very much like that. You could even go from down to the artist level. Why would an artist, if they're successful, let's take the example of a Taylor Swift. Why would Taylor Swift, who's got a dedicated market, all that brand awareness, why would she not just do it directly through her own portal, her own system, whereby people subscribe to her music, they pay her, she could with that provide additional benefits such as there could be artwork provided. They could send the record sleeves through the post if you buy them through the website. You could have a subscription model to that music. You could get access to the latest music early. This could be done in any niche audience because obviously with the internet, niches can be local, but they can also be global. So, we joke about that. The middle-aged guy with a Rolex sweater who's into smooth jazz, smooth, and, sits at home listening to his vinyls. But there might be one in each city, but that's a very, the riches is in the niches, is an old saying in marketing. And if you can target that audience and sell products to them, where stuff can be of extreme value to certain people who really value that product, who would value, live streamings or, question and answer sessions. And that's where I think really the growth area will become. As we move towards more of a digitalization, we probably will go back to more of the human element, the human contact, that I think we're in the initial stages now of digitalization, where it's still mass market. I predict we'll go towards more of a, mass market, but niche audience.
I think to some degree, artists and musicians have really thought it's enough just to be an artist and musician, to play a good song, to sing it really well. A lot of them play covers. Very few actually write and produce and perform their songs. But that's where the money is if you're going to think purely in terms of producing content. A lot of artists, however, really failed to see the business aspect, the side of things. And really, it's the IP, the performance, and the marketing and the distribution that goes hand in hand. And really, to get heard now, you need to have an eye and manage all of those things as an artist. It's not enough just to be a good artist, because now we're surrounded by choice, we're surrounded by platforms with bombarding us with lots of information, different adverts, lots of options. And very little curation. So what does that mean is that we've got to make sure the artists are visible and seen, but they've got to ensure that they know about the business and they do some type of marketing activity to back themselves. I think only then can we start seeing more selection and a bit more competition in the market.
Obviously, I think this is a tricky one because clearly music in its better forms is art form. No, it's probably the purest art form. But having said that, obviously a lot of disposable pop music is borderline whether it is art, and a lot of it is plastic pop produced by committee, by picking members of a band to fit demographics and really to tick the boxes to be money making. So we're discussing the broad strokes, but obviously there's more art based, and then there's less. We're not suggesting that a band should start with a business model or a business plan. Go through a business model canvas. But I'll be honest, that's probably what people or bands created from TV shows like Pop Idol and that stuff. That's probably where they do start out from, and they hit those demographics. Obviously, if you're in the music industry for the art, for the art aspect, you might want to be listened to by as many people as possible. You might value fame, you might value the love of the music more than money. And so in that context, Spotify is probably the best thing for you. But if you're searching for money, I would doubt that it's ever the best option to give it away for free. If you're giving everything away for free, why would anybody logically pay more than they have to pay? So, if you're in it for money, if you are that plastic pop and you want more than money, maybe you have to, make it harder to access, take it off these platforms. Don't give access in the free stuff. Stop recording music videos unless they're on your own personal website. So it's it's a freemium model. When we talk about freemium models, generally what we want to do is up the price at a certain point in the future when you've got market acceptance. The problem with pop music or any sort of music is it's almost impossible to do that. So you're doing a lifetime freemium that will only lead you being poverty stricken.
So if you think of even Taylor Swift, she uses or she's advised to use some of her music as a loss leader to gain sponsorship, in Nike, for instance, or to get exposure in films, the movie industry. In everything, there's a value exchange. And as an artist, you've got to think very carefully about what the exchange of value and who your real customers are, and then work towards that to get money. Because often the money is not in the end consumer necessarily. It could be in the person who's going to help you distribute it. It could be in the royalties. It could be in, if you're looking for funding, in the person that's going to give you funding, or the crowd or the group that's going to offer that. But you've got to think, what's the value exchange? Because nothing in this world is free, but there has to be a fair exchange. And to date, because musicians think in that sort of one-dimensional way, it's about the content and the art, there hasn't been a fair exchange and a fair bit of exploitation. But that doesn't have to always be the way. There are other options. And I have seen a fair few artists taking it upon themselves and being more proactive to really own that marketing and channel. And a lot of building websites with subscription pages, downloads. They're trying to collect and engage with their audiences. They're trying to partner with other like artists to create even bigger like audiences, to then create a virtual network effect. And all of these things are essential. And if you can do it yourself and you can work with others that can do that, you're more likely to get heard by people that can give you extra funding or advice where you need it. Because anybody will jump at a chance of signing somebody up if they know that they're getting a crowd listening to them. That's essential. People with money want to know that their money and their investment is going to be well spent, I suppose. And to do that, it's easy now with Google Analytics. You can show people numbers, you can show people your audience size, so it's much easier than you actually think.
Yeah, look, I think we've covered a lot here, but at the end of the day, we've only really skimmed the surface. Music is a huge industry; it's a huge art form, and let's all hope it stays that way. It stays an art form, and it stays. At the end of the day, we've listened to music from the beginning of time, so hopefully we always will. We've touched on a lot of subjects. Obviously, there's music from the highest art form to the lowest Muzak in the supermarket aisle. So obviously we can't cover every aspect, but hopefully we've given you some ideas, some concepts maybe, or some methods of thinking. Whether we're right or wrong, I have no idea.
All right, well, thanks for listening.
Have a great day. Bye.